Testing, testing.
Forum here, but I've yet to establish saying, Richie, I have the preamble. Should I go ahead and read that? Okay.
Yep, we are recording.
It's the virtual meeting preamble for ABBA because of the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic and the limitations on group gatherings imposed by the governor's executive orders. This meeting is being held by electronic communication means on the Zoom platform. It is authorized by the county's November 18th Continuity of Government Ordinance, this authority's resolution of April 22nd, and the Virginia statute signed into law on April 24th, permitting this authority to meet electronically to discuss and transact business necessary to continue its operations. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. Everyone on the phone and attending via Zoom from the public is in listen-only mode. During public comment periods, please enter your comment in the chat and it will be read into the record. Include your full name and the magisterial district in which you reside. If you don't know your magisterial district, please provide a general location or your home or business street address. We will run through the chat comments first and then take comments by phone. For those on the phone, please use *9 to indicate that you'd like to make a public comment. We will ask you also to provide your full name and magisterial district or general location of your home or business, and then allow up to 3 minutes for your comment. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. And with that explanation, I ask the board members attending to identify themselves and their general location. Trevor, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Trevor Henry. I'm at my home of residence in Albemarle County.
Donna?
Donna Price, Scottsville Magisterial District Supervisor from my residence in the district.
Bill?
Bill Fritz, and I'm at home in Charlottesville.
Waldo?
Waldo Jaquith at home in Stony Point.
Liz?
Liz Palmer, and I'm at my home in Ivy.
And I'm Bucky Walsh, and I'm at my home in Earlysville. So with that said, I see that we have a quorum, and I call this meeting to order. The first item that I have on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Hopefully everyone is in receipt of the revised agenda that Mike provided yesterday. I heard Trevor mention that we needed to add an item on the agenda with regard to the next meeting date. So perhaps we could tack that on at the end of new business item C. Is that okay? Yep. Is there anything else that we would change on this agenda?
I move that we approve the amended agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Liz. And was that a second from you, Trevor?
It was, yes, sir.
Excellent, thank you. Well then, all those in favor, I'll do a quick roll call. Donna?
Sorry, aye.
Trevor?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Waldo?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
And the chair is in favor as well. So the agenda is passed unanimously. That takes us to brief announcements by the authority members. Does anyone have a brief announcement? Raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized. Liz?
I just wanted to say at the last meeting, I went on asking Derek about questions, and he offered to talk to me offline. And I have that meeting set up for, I believe it is not this Friday, but next Friday. So I will, if he tells me anything that is something we don't already know, I will go ahead and convey that, whatever I learn, to the rest of the members. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anybody else? Seeing no other indications, we'll move on to our public comment period. This is where all the folks who aren't on the screen, but on the phone or just listening in are welcome to make comments, as I mentioned in the preamble. Mike, do we have anyone Who's raised
Um,
their hand?
No one has raised their hand.
Ah.
Okay, here we go. This is a reading it into the record for Tim Higgins, who lives in Mallard Lake in Earlysville. And I believe that's the Whitehall district. Has ABBA asked CenturyLink for a briefing on its rollout plan for fiber service in Albemarle County? If not, could you please? I'll take that answer, Chair. I have
Just a second, Mike. There were a couple of more things before that. If
before
you
that.
scroll
Oh, I
back up
did.
a little bit.
Okay. In September, this is still Tim. Sorry about that. Sorry about not scrolling correctly. In September, CenturyLink rebranded as Lumen and announced its quantum fiber platform for residential and small business owners. I'm interested in hearing about Lumen's plans to convert its twisted pair DSL network to fiber outside of the VADI bidding process. In other words, is there any hope for those of us needing better than 3 megabits per second or worse down DSL to get it outside of the VADI and other grant processes? And then repeating, has ABBA asked CenturyLink for a briefing on its rollout plans for fiber service in Albemarle County? If not, could you please? So yes, John Noreen and I have met with CenturyLink to discuss their rollout plans for fiber beyond the 2 VADI programs. Remember, there's the VADI 2020, which is active and working, or going into the activation mode sometime starting in January, going through March. And then there's the VADI 2021 proposal that's in front of the DHCD review team. So we hope to hear about that soon. As far as moving forward with any additional DSL type activations, they prefer not to do that. So any additional DSL activations will not be made. If they do anything new, it'll be through a fiber connection. So I think one of the things we should do in answer to this question from a resident is perhaps call CenturyLink in either during the January or the February meeting of the Broadband Authority. Hope that answered your question, Tim. And I'll go on to the next one, Chair, if there are any more. And there are not. Okay. Seeing no other questions in the chat and we have no phone callers, I think we can move past public comment if everyone agrees.
Tim, thanks for the question. It's a great topic, and since CenturyLink provides service to so many people in the county, we will be pursuing that with them. And the old business, I'm sorry, back up. The approval of the October 28th minutes. I noticed that our esteemed secretary had provided a copy of those. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them? Were there any changes? And are we good to go with those? I enjoyed reading them. It was like a meeting I had been to.
Creative fiction.
No, not at all.
I
So
make a
I
motion to
would
approve.
move to accept those as approved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you for the second. All those in favor, let me run the roll real quick. Donna,
Aye.
Trevor,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Waldo,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So they're approved unanimously. Thank you again, Mr. Secretary. Yes, Bill.
Just want to let you know, I'm going to be trying to roll out more quickly an action memo in the future. So I'm trying to get a format for that. So hopefully you'll see that next week.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thanks,
We'll look
Bill.
forward to it.
Yeah. Welcome.
Well, with that done, let's go to the old business. Mike, the VADI 2020 and 2021 updates. I think you almost just gave those, but if there's anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I'll start with VADI 2020, which is the active project funded through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. 8 project areas that are under construction. So most of the project areas are currently under construction, and we're hearing from many of the residents, some of them which go up to the folks doing the work and ask them, is this CenturyLink? And the answer is yes. So we've put together a new update to the frequently asked questions, and that went out to over 200 residents this week. So we're receiving questions about that. So things are rolling along. I think the The benefit that the residents are going to see is close to what we wanted. They're going to receive invitations with a singular phone number that allows them to call in and pre-register for the service. The hope was that they would have a portal, a web portal that would allow them to register, but instead they're just going to get a phone number so that they bypass the general CenturyLink customer service desk. So we're working toward that. Should be a really good way to get things out. So that's the VADI 2020 update. Everything's on target to start rolling out January, February, and March. All 8 projects being done before March 5th is the current goal. So we're excited. It's a good thing going on there. Move on to VADI 2021, unless there's any questions. Any questions about 2020? Okay. 2021. The good news we heard this week, there were a lot of questions about it. We still were unaware until really Monday that the authorization to add an additional 31 million. So 31 million to the VADI budget for this year for 2021 projects is now 50 million across the Commonwealth.
Wow.
So that's really good news, and lots of great applications out there. We still feel we have a very good chance. The ABBA and CenturyLink, which has 10 project areas now. One of our project areas was successfully challenged, and we've removed it from the application, and that's the Boonsville area. CVIC has a number of members in the Boonsville area that are off the Whitehall substation, and CVIC came in and said we would prefer that you not include that in your application, so we did. So we're going to have to, encourage CVEC, Firefly to work through that Boonsville area. So that's the one big challenge with that. Everything else we feel we've got a really good chance to get funded on. So we're excited about the future of VADI 2021. And that's my update. Any questions on either of those? Well, great. Thanks, board. Appreciate the time for a brief update there.
Nice and succinct. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, you're welcome.
The ABBA financial report, that just keeps getting longer and longer. This is great, Trevor.
Well, as you recall from reading the minutes and the discussion from last week, Supervisor Palmer had asked for an inclusion of the CRF CARES funding projects in the next budget report. So that really is why I guess there's a second report as part of our budget. As far as the actual broadband authority budget, Mike, could you bring up the PDF of the agenda, and that way I can just talk to it real quick, please? Or I can do it if you'd like me to. Nope, here it comes. Okay. So same format as we reviewed last time. From an ABBA budget perspective, the only thing that changed was we talked about the movement of the part-time wages last month in order to cover the potential overage in the fund balance. That work has occurred, and so we are whole from a budgeting perspective. I will note, and tying back to what Mike just mentioned, the 640 is our commitment as part of the 2021 VADI proposal that's in. That will get amended at some point to reflect the scope of work that has been pulled out. So possibly I'll have to talk to Mike on the right time to show that. But anyhow, really there's no changes in the budget other than the movement of that one item. And we have yet to receive an invoice from CenturyLink on the 2020 projects. Any questions on the ABBA budget? I can't see everybody. So moving on to the CARES Act projects. Mike, I'm gonna bring you in for any questions that the authority members might have. But we basically have 3 CARES funded projects underway right now. You can see them, they're listed in the table. 2 of those projects The first one, Chantel Beam, and the third one, the bottom one, the Nelson Cable, those are funded through the CARES funding that Albemarle County received. The middle one, the Firefly Birches Creek item, we were able to get that pushed out to the state when the state opened up their funding, and we were able to get that approved. And the timing of that just worked so that we were able to tap into the state funding. So this reflects 3 projects that are underway. Mike provided some scope within the information, and that is the budget report available for questions for Mike and I.
I have no questions. I just really appreciate seeing it all down in one place together with the, with our budget. And whenever, I'm not quite sure when the Board of Supervisors is going to see this in its totality. We have a date on that yet, when you're going to present, Mike, or how that's going to work?
Supervisor Palmer, I think the answer to the question is in the quarterly report. Right now, that's not scheduled until January 20th. So during the
So
quarterly.
And so when that does come out, I just would request, unless there's some reason not to, when you do the, what the Broadband Authority has done and what the CARES, if you can put a lot of information as to the areas, like list all the areas and whatnot. We have a lot more work to do, but sometimes I think that the board as a whole doesn't recognize how much has actually gotten done, which I think is not enough, but it's a reasonable amount. And I'd like to make sure that we really communicate that, all these different areas. So thank you. That's my
So noted.
comment, but it's great. Thank you very much, Trevor, for putting it on the spot.
It is a big help. Thanks, Trevor.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment just as
Sure.
a comparison. I mean, it's really more sort of a reflection of the lack of adequacy of service provided in our area. I have what I think is generally pretty good internet, but I just checked mine just as our meeting started, and I'm at 5.45 megabytes per second download and 0.45 megabytes per second upload. And I look here at their minimum plans are 25 megabytes per second. I can't even imagine what 1,000 would be. And I think I have fairly decent internet in terms of what I do, which just reflects, I think, how poorly so many of the residents in our county are being served when they can't even get that. So as y'all probably heard at the meeting we had a week or so ago about, the budget and everything, we've asked county staff to go back and look to see if there's any way we can put some additional money into expanding broadband. And I think what this committee in particular does is as essential to our residents as electricity and clean water is. So I'm hoping that we'll find a way to put some more money to expand our services so that more of the residents in the county actually have some internet, even if it, as mine appears to be by these standards, at least pretty marginal.
I actually have a question that I forgot on this. I went to the, on the Chantel site, I went to the iwantbeam.com and watched their little video. What is it about this particular service that makes it okay when it's raining and when the leaves are on the trees? And they have a little video that says that their reliability is so much better than DSL. Can somebody explain to me why that is on fixed wireless?
Yes, I'll try. The good news is that Chantel will be joining our January meeting. They've confirmed they'll be joining the January meeting, and they can answer all of those questions then. It's the high-powered nature of the antennas that are part of the customer premise equipment, as well as the equipment that's sending the signals out that are on the towers. They have a much broader and much stronger signal. But I think I'll defer and let Chantel provide the details on how it all works, if that is okay. Is that
Thank you.
okay? Thank you.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Anything else? Well, then let's close out our old business then. Thank you very much, Trevor. And move on to new business. Oh, yes, everyone got bigger. It's wonderful. We've got a discussion of the legislative priorities referencing the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. So what do we want our folks in Richmond to do for us to make VADI better? And it has to be something more substantive than just send us all the money.
Delegate Bell asked very specifically for legislative changes that would improve the VADI process. I think I put that in the email. And you know, if there's something specific, they said that they only have 7 bills that they can put through. And I think
Right, the short session.
yes, and the idea is to combine some of these broadband ones or piggyback them on something else. So I'll let those who understand actually going through the VADI process better than I do comment.
I'm glad to address the board, if that's okay, Chair.
Sure, Mike, go ahead. You've got the most experience here with this.
Okay, I'll try to be succinct. One of the things that I'm going to do as a takeaway from this meeting is to send, there's a memo that was sent around from Evan Feynman to all of the Broadband Advisory Council members. And in the memo, he explains the process that the Broadband Advisory Council has the task to make recommendations to DHCD for changes to the VADI program. One of the most significant changes that is coming forward that the Broadband Advisory Council will be working on next Friday. So we have a meeting from 2 to 4 next Friday to go through, you know, some of the ideas that have been going around: improved mapping, more inclusion, or I'll put it in frank terms, pressure on the electrical companies to do a better job of allowing fiber to be included in their process. And then the one that we've been talking about, or at least maybe we've been talking about, is the availability for wireless service authorities like ourselves, otherwise known as broadband authorities, and their ability to apply for funding through VADI on their own without having to include a private sector ISP. So those types of conversations are going to be happening at that meeting at 2 o'clock on Friday. And I'll report out both in email and then at our December meeting about the outcomes of how we're offering up changes to the DHCD VADI program. And hopefully some of the things that we've suggested and will be put into place. So it's a good thing that's going on. Hopefully it'll be it'll come out with some valid changes to the program.
How will that get to specific delegates to carry that forward?
I think well, I don't know. That's a good question. I'll answer that question. I'll pose the question at the Broadband Advisory Council. How do the suggestions that we put forward, how are they provided to the rest of the delegation, meaning the Senate and all of the delegates?
There's a certain interest in delegates to get a bill that's meaningful and get it through. I would say it's a political success to do that. And so when a delegate actually asks us to come up with something specific, I think it is in our interest to make sure that it gets to a specific person in the House and a specific person in the Senate in a specific way. And I recognize that this group knows so much more about this than I do, and they're probably very well equipped to get through the General Assembly. But if it's nebulous, or they don't have somebody that really wants to take it in, I will say that during our legislative session, Matt Ferris announced that he voted against giving more money to broadband because he thought that the money should really go to cell phone service because that's what he really needed in Campbell County. And so you never can tell what the landscape is of individuals. And so I just want to say that it's to our advantage to try to really be aggressive to get somebody to carry it forward if it's something that we really want to have happen.
Well, there were two specific things that come to my mind. One of them Mike just sort of mentioned, and we've talked about it in the past. And this doesn't have much to do with the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, but it does have to do with making it easier to get broadband out. Every time Dominion buries a power line, which is a wonderful thing, the cost to them to, put in some conduit that they could drag some fiber along with that, or someone in the future could, is very low. I don't know if they have a tariff that lets them charge the equivalent of pole attachment fees for letting someone else run their fiber through that or not. But if that were in place, the cost to deploy fiber any place that power lines have been buried would be really, really low. And of course, Dominion's coming along behind the places where they've buried their power lines, and they're taking the old poles out. So, there's a gap there that needs to be covered on the Dominion side of things. Obviously, CVC has gone a different route, and it's not going to be an issue for them. But Dominion's been burying stuff like gangbusters around the county, and electrical service gets more robust as a result. Good thing. Don't want to discourage it. But the incremental cost to create this tariffable service that they could sell or feature that they could sell would be relatively low. And then anybody could run fiber out, nearly to your home to get power out there. The second thing that I have seen that comes up is that every year DHCD has a little bit different criteria for how they're going to evaluate body grants. And I respect the fact that they're adapting, changing, growing with the times. But from the perspective of folks submitting these things, you're doing a dance trying to figure out, well, this did or didn't work last time, and now all the rules are different. I don't even know how to go get the money this time. That in itself is a barrier to localities such as us being able to come up with the best possible proposal.
That's what's actually happening to these delegates. They are getting constant complaints that the VATI grants are too difficult to apply for, and they don't have the time to apply. And one of the reasons why Bell asked us, he said, Albemarle County has been successful. Tell us why you're successful. Tell us how we can change so we can make it easier. So they're getting a lot of complaints about the process.
And we're successful in large part because of Mike Culp.
Right.
But beyond that, anybody could take Mike's last year application and use it for theirs, except they'll have changed the rules next year. So, I appreciate the need to change the rules, but there needs to be some more transparency and maybe less changing in that area.
Yeah, as long as we've got Mike, I just assume it'd be complex so the other communities aren't as successful. I'm sorry, but that's, I looked at how successful we've been in Mike, and, when I say we, that's kind of the royal we, I had nothing to do with it. Lucky, I appreciate your passing, compliments on to Mike, but whatever y'all have been doing has made Albemarle County very successful. So I'd rather they not make it easier for the other, locales. Let us continue to be successful.
I was really more focused on not making it easier for others, just making it even easier for us to keep succeeding.
For what it's
This-
worth, I believe you have as well, Bucky. I've read through some of the other applications filed by other localities, and some of them are really just quite low quality. Like, I don't think that they have the resources within that county in order to provide a competitive grant application for reasons that I think are probably tied to personnel and resources. And I don't know that making the process easier in the way that we might be thinking of would necessarily help some of those localities, if you follow.
Yeah, I hear you. Again, I'm with Donna on this. I don't really want to make it easier for them. I just want to make it easier for us.
I have a question for probably Mike on this one, and I'll try to ask it in the least confusing way as I can, Mike. But as I think about the process, and I think about what we hear a lot about, some of the, I'll call them kind of the incumbent ISPs in our area. Is there anything in the process that would be beneficial to the county that would weight performance, execution, any of those kinds of metrics that would enable, I'll just say better performing ISPs and entities that have better customer service have more traction in the process. Is that something worth? I guess I'll ask the question and see how you respond to it.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, board, for allowing me a little bit of time to talk about the process. And thanks for all of the compliments. I don't necessarily agree with them. I have to be frank. Our projects, the projects that we've submitted, have all been small in comparison to some of the larger projects that are out there. Now, that may not be a fault of mine. All of our projects have been within the 2 million or less. I would prefer that we were way up there on some of the big projects that have been awarded funds. So just to let you know, although I'm how can I say this? I don't want to be, I won't go much further with that. The second thing, the question about improving customer service is very much at the forefront. There is no use in having a gigabit fiber service at your home if, when you're in the middle of a meeting like this, the connection goes down and you're not coming back online, and things just get worse instead of better. It's almost like it would be better if you didn't have the service, because then you're not in a situation where suddenly you can't move forward and do the work you need. So a couple of things there. The ability to promote competition does a couple of things. It's going to help us lower price, and it's also going to allow us to create redundant fiber rings through the county, so that if I drop off on a meeting like this, I at least have some capability of using a backup resource so that I can connect back in and be able to participate. So that's the first thing. The second thing about customer service stats, we want to do a better job at the state of collecting information directly from the customer, meaning it's not enough to hear from the ISPs that they're providing good service, or they're providing adequate service, or they're providing certain speeds. We need to hear directly from the citizens on a more frequent basis as well. So there is an effort to improve the way that we're providing the broadband map. So we're hopeful to do a little more work on that, so that across the Commonwealth, we're getting better data. And that data needs to include performance of the ISPs. And what we want to do, combined with my first statement, the competitive nature of putting that all together, that's going to force the ISPs to be better. We'll have data that shows you're not providing excellent customer service, and that's not a great thing. So we're going to try to work with you, or at least it forces them to do a better job. The last thing I'll talk about, I know everybody has a lot going on, is there's a definite need for all of the ISPs to provide accurate address listings when they put a project together. There's a lot of things that go on that they're just sending out, this is an area we're going to serve, only to find out later it's missing a pocket, or it's not including additional addresses that seem to be included in the project map. So one of the things we're going to be talking about is the capability or the requirement that every awarded body application, before the funds can start flowing back to the ISP, they have to provide a list that everyone can use and access to confirm that the address that they're thinking is going to be in the project is absolutely included. Or if it's not in there, then that means there's another project that'll come through and get that address at a later date. So I think I answered your question, Trevor. Thank you, board, for the time to talk it through, and hopefully that answered. All right.
Thanks, Mike. Will you be able to report out after your regional meeting next Friday? Would really, I think, report out to the authority. It'd be interesting to, to hear what the discussion points were, and then really what recommendations will be being made.
Yeah. Yes.
Supervisor Palmer's first question was, is there a way to tie some of that information back to Delegate Bell as well that is actionable?
Yes, we'll do. And I'll share the listing of the delegates and senators that are currently on the Broadband Advisory Council. So you'll see that as well.
Can I ask a question about what you just said about requiring the ISPs to give a list of the folks who are going to get service, which of course would be wonderful. Do you think you can force them to do it? Because if we have a community out in the rural areas that is only going to be served by CenturyLink and a fiber, if they say no, are we just saying, okay, well, those people can't get service because certainly Comcast or somebody else is not going to go out there?
Good question, Supervisor Palmer, and I agree with you. It is a potential showstopper for especially the larger ISPs. They may come back and say, because of the corporate rules and regulations, they're not able to provide proposed customer lists. They're not even able to.
Showstopper, but one of the VADI requirements is to break things down by passings, how many residences or businesses you pass. And so if we can't verify the numbers that they're providing us, which we could only do with the residences, then we don't, how can we sign off on that? I mean, we have a very legitimate claim on this data.
Right, exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Broadband Advisory Council is across the spectrum, meaning there's members from the Senate and there's delegates on it as well. There's people from the municipalities and there's representatives from private sector. So the discussions there will lead to, remember, this is not a definite, so it is certainly something we would like, at least I would like to do. I don't know that the rest of the Broadband Advisory Council will agree with that assessment, but we can just put it forward and hope that it comes back with a positive result. Does that help? I think that answered the question.
And this meeting is not this Friday, but the following Friday.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought you guys were really intense. You were going to be meeting on the day after Thanksgiving.
No.
Yeah, my opinion just went down. Anything else on that topic?
Yeah, I have a couple things.
Okay, Waldo?
Yeah, so it seems to me like broadband mapping should be handled centrally by the state and not on a per municipality basis. And nobody's going to say we don't have the resources. Okay, we'll figure it out, because this is a serious problem. It's hard enough for us, and we have lots of resources. I don't know what they're doing in Fluvanna on broadband mapping. I don't know what they're doing on Nelson and broadband. They're just out of luck. And so it's a fundamental disconnect to say you have to be able to demonstrate there's this need for service, not already service there, and so on, and also not provide any resources in order to gather that data. What we have, what the schools built that we use now, there is zero reason why they can't be used for the entire state. It would be a pretty trivial thing to scale up to do that. The state should do that. So that's the first thing that I would like to see VADI doing. The second is, this is not prescriptive, it's a complaint. I can't prescribe a solution to this off the top of my head. The current funding model is creating these ever smaller and farther flung islands of no service. So these incumbent providers get to expand their footprint more and more, leaving these smaller unserved areas that it makes no sense for a new provider to show up and say, well, we'll get 12 customers here and 15 customers 5 miles away there, and then over that mountain there, we'll get another 16. And so Vadi's model of expanding the footprints of incumbent providers is allowing them to enhance a monopoly while then prohibiting overbuilding, as we saw with the Boonsville build. And it's the conflict of these two things that I fear is contributing to monopolistic behavior. And something's got to be done because this story doesn't have a happy ending. And I'd like to see something, an intervention before that happens. And one last point that is not about the Virginia grant process directly, I'll just say we should anticipate a change in the federal funding model under the Biden administration. One of the ways that may change will be funding flowing to states such as Vadi type grant funding, which would be enhanced really significantly how much funding they would have available, in which this year's funding wouldn't be a fluke, but perhaps a low point going forward, and then moving away from the RDOF type funding to the degree to which it's being used right now. Not a forecast, just something that we should keep in mind might be possible with future rounds of funding.
So,
Thank you. Thanks, Walter.
so those are all really good points. And do you think that, Mike, that things like the current funding model enhancing a monopoly would be covered under your meeting next Friday? Is that the kind of thing that they might talk about? Is that structure of the funding?
I think Waldo is right on with the comments regarding the creation of the smaller pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Going, into I think it's how can I explain this? I think we need to recognize that it's important to encourage partnerships. And, Vadi is trying very hard to make sure that they don't allow what is typically called cherry picking, where a provider will come in and only bid on the areas where there's the most density so that they'll get the most. We're getting to that point across the state. I wish there were a better way to prohibit that from happening. But I think it's complex enough that it really is a tough discussion. Let's just put it that way. It's a tough discussion to bridge that gap and say you're no longer going to be a monopoly, and you need to either reduce your pricing for that. That's the other thing that we do talk about a little bit, is the difference between the urban areas paying X amount and then the rural areas being forced to pay an additional amount. Those types of things do come up. So I'm not answering your question very well. I apologize for that. I think I can just leave it as a very tough discussion that's worthy of further review and conversation.
I will say that the little video on the Chantel website, they have actually explains this creation of the monopoly, that they're just not going to go and serve these little pockets. And they say that their fixed wireless program is the solution to these little pockets. But I think it's funny that Waldo brought that up, because I just watched that video and it literally explains that problem. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Supervisor Palmer, I was on the meeting with the delegates last Friday. I don't recall a deadline or a date that Delegate Bell asked for the information. Is it just ahead of the budget process coming out of the winter, or do you know, like
they typically want, because they only have 7 bills this year, typically they want things as soon as possible so that they can get them in the proper form and hook them on to different bills. And I just don't think that Delegate Bell would have asked, it's unusual that they specifically ask for something. So that to me just means he wants to run with it. So I would just, I'd be more than happy to ask him, but it's usually as soon as possible. We're getting pretty close.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on this topic?
Well, Bucky, just trying to end with some closure of the specific actions that we're asking Mike to do on this, and what involvement we would want to have as an authority. It sounds like, you know, there's agreement around the meeting that will be attended next week, a week from Friday. Mike can report out on that, but it would seem like we want to provide that input as quickly as we can out after that to Delegate Bell. And we'll just charge Mike to kind of summarize that input, or really looking for clarity on the board on what we should be directing our CAO to do.
Well, let me offer this and see if we can get agreement on it. I'd like to see what Mike has from this meeting circulated to this group with his recommendations for how that ought to translate into legislative priorities. We should have the opportunity to comment on that, amend it, et cetera, and do it not as a meeting, of course, because Richie would tell us that was wrong, but just offering advice to our delegate, which is not a per se an action of this authority. And then we can refine that and get that out to Delegate Bell in the most expeditious fashion possible.
And would it be appropriate, Richie, to ask the attorney's office to look at that, since you guys deal with our legislative priorities and know the process very well and are always involved in this every single year?
I don't know how well we know the process, but it is appropriate. So I'd work with Mike and others in our office if it comes to that.
Okay.
I think that's appropriate. And I think it's appropriate for him he can send out memos to you all. Again, I just caution that your responses go directly back to him and not to everybody, and just let him play point and ask for clarifications.
Does that address your interest there, Trevor?
Yes, sir. That wraps it up. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you for the closure on that. Anything else on this topic, Mike?
If it pleases the board, I was looking through the agenda and trying to find exactly what Liz is asking for. What is the deadline? You know, what is the role of the Broadband Advisory Council for submitting their recommendations for approval? And it is not included in the agenda, but one thing I did note, and this actually happened during the November meeting, is that the authorities had at least one person who came in during the public comment period and advocated for allowing the authorities to convince the Broadband Advisory Council to allow them to apply for body funds without an ISP. So there is some, I'm not sure what you call that, but there's some of that going on. The reason that I bring it up is that this meeting next Friday has a public comment period. If anyone from the ABBA board wishes to be on and make public comments about what's going on, you know, some of the things that I heard tonight would be great for the Broadband Advisory Council to hear on Friday. So it's early in the meeting, so 2 o'clock sometime. So I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just giving information on what's going on with the Broadband Advisory Council. So that's it, Chair. Thank you for that brief interlude.
So will you send that information to us? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to email Delegate Bell and ask him the question of where is he on doing this? That we discussed it at the meeting, because I told him that I would be asking our broadband authority and Mike Culp this at this meeting. And so I'll follow up and I'll put that you're going to this. I'm sure he knows about this meeting that you're going to next Friday, but I'll mention that in the email and say that that the broadband authority talked about possibilities that we're going to be discussing on Friday. And that way we'll find out more about what Delegate Bell actually does or doesn't want to do.
Right.
Well, thank you. And desperate to drive a nail in this topic to close it out, I'm just going to read the next item of new business and we'll move on to that. A report on the Board of Supervisors Strategic Plan Review and Capital Planning Work Session in regards to broadband, which was strategy number 9. Who's running with this ball?
If it pleases the chair, I'd like to tee it up for the.
Please do, Trevor.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, and appreciate the discussion item here. I think it's a good opportunity to have. Mike sent out an email over the weekend with an update on Monday, I believe, that actually shared the timing of the board discussion last week around the strategic plan, capital plan, and it was a great discussion. Supervisors Palmer and Price will certainly weigh in this discussion to provide their perspective. But I wanted to just summarize that there was strong support and consensus around the funding of broadband. Continuing and moving forward with great urgency. The county executive Jeff Richardson kind of landed that collective of comments before we moved on to kind of the next agenda item, with staff taking an action to come back in January as part of our really kickoff of the 22 budget process with recommendations on broadband funding, and we covered some different areas on that. So the memo that Mike shared with the authority was work that he led and actually started about 6 weeks ago. He and I worked together pretty extensively on it. John Noreen, who has been contract serviced support to help manage the CARES Act funding, the projects that we looked at a few minutes ago, was able to lend an eye to it, as well as some other staff within IT. And really, it's trying to capture the work that we've done, a reflection of what it's taken just to execute the VATI projects, and the impact of the pandemics, and what that means for the future. So that really was kind of the work that we did as staff. I have briefed up the county executive office, our chief financial officer, with some potential scope and some program levels. We've even talked kind of looking at some affordability, what might be achievable, for the balance of FY21 and into FY22. And so we were hoping today to hopefully had a chance to look at the memo that Mike provided. And if you haven't get a chance, go and listen to the board meeting. But we're hoping to get some feedback around what some of those recommendations might look like. And I'll say, really the approach that we took to advance our broadband priorities is a funding stream. Ideally, it's a combination of one-time and recurring that can cover near-term kind of triage issues that have been exacerbated during the pandemic on the need of connection, long-term objectives, as well as to adequately staff this effort, which the effort has been significant to absorb within our county structure to date. Two kind of main components. One is our infrastructure component, and we referenced the strategic plan work that we did this spring and summer, Bucky, that you led as kind of our guideposts on on how we'd want to move forward. Within the infrastructure, it is, what we're saying is kind of a continuing to triage to meet current urgent needs of access. The fixed wireless program that's underway, some of the CARES Act funding projects, and expanding on that, while executing the longer term plan of getting fiber out and continuing to partner with ISPs, trying to maximize the amount of grant funding we can draw down, and really kind of doing that in parallel. Secondly, and it's in the strategic plan as kind of a noted yet unfunded area, but an area that got a lot of discussion around by the board, and I think has certainly risen as an incredible priority for the county, which is really applying an equity lens to where we're spending our money and where we're moving the program. And so, rural areas certainly has been our focus, and rightfully so. But what we've learned through this pandemic and work that the schools have done is that we have an affordability issue in the county, and especially in some of the urban ring areas, our development areas, where folks just can't afford the access that they need to have behind me, you see my wife's whiteboard. There's 2 teachers working out of my house right now, and then my son sometimes works here and not. Unfortunately, I'm in a location that I have good connection, but if you're not, that puts a big strain on families. And so, we really look at a program that could be both the infrastructure side and the affordability side. Mike has done some really good due diligence through programs that we've used this fall that we could potentially continue with some funding. And then finally, I have talked to our county executive about the potential of creating an Office of Broadband Access that's really modeled after our Economic Development Office. And that really is to reflect our current levels of support that we're doing for broadband and managing all of the work we do. And I think by going that route, it's a formal commitment by the county of the importance of this. And it's more than just our VADI projects. It's all the customer service management that we do, can do, and maybe can do more on. It's bringing in some other resources from the county that have the expertise in our capital project management that might help us work with the ISPs that maybe can even help move these projects out quicker. So that's really kind of the summary. We made some thoughts, or created some thoughts around what those funding levels might look like. But I wanted to just kind of tee up why did you get this memo and some background on it. And then I would certainly love to hear from our supervisors that are on our authority about their perspective and input that they have. And I'll mute myself for now, other than for questions. Thank you.
Who wants it first?
I have one question. When we had discussion before about the affordability and actual equipment in the house and paying for the service, we talked at that point about using the CARES money to do some of that. And wasn't some of that done? Didn't we put some kind of money, COVID related money, to that? I'm just forgetting. Mike? No? Yes?
I can try to answer the question, Supervisor Palmer. I think it really needs to go to the team that did the human services part of the CARES funding. It's a program that they have set up with the United Way. What I've asked for from them, and it's happening. They're providing utility support, and as part of that utilities support, residents can apply for and receive subsidies for broadband bills, so internet bills. What I haven't received yet is the detail of how many families have applied in that way. We know that there's many families that are applying for other utilities relief, but we just don't know how many people are on the internet side of that. Hopefully I can get that information to you, but great question. It's been asked. The program's already in place. It's something that we may be able to leverage going forward with non-CRF funds. So with non-coronavirus relief funds, if we have a way to continue to refresh that, I think is one of the goals of the equity and moving forward with providing some relief for families who can't afford their internet bills.
And that's the model that Trevor said you were using.
Yes.
Can you also talk a little bit about the schools program and what they've done for students that have been identified that don't have access or can't afford it?
Yes, the one of the great programs that the school division put together early on, they realized early on that a number of families, especially in the urban ring, would have difficulty with paying their bills. And what they put together was a voucher system with Comcast. So what happens with those particular families is they submit an application to receive those funds. The school division looks that over and decides whether or not they are appropriate to receive the funds. And then a voucher is provided and they can sign up or just redo their bills. So the bills are actually coming back to the school division. So far, the latest count that was of early last week, 52 families have signed up for that. a couple of notes on that. It's a great program, but again, it's relegated to where there is Comcast service. So we want to expand upon that to include all ISPs, as well as beyond just ASPS, Albemarle County Public Schools families. So we want to include people who are on fixed income, folks that are not in the Comcast service area, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. So that's the goal of the equity program, to put it into more people's hands.
Okay, well, the board certainly is going to want that, and I know you'll provide it. The only other things that I'll add to Trevor's discussion as a board member was there's tremendous frustration associated with those islands that Waldo was talking about earlier, where you get, these small little places where their next door neighbor has fiber or has some good internet service and there's nothing next door. And I know Ann Malik attended some of the VACO sessions on broadband, and I was not able to do that. I don't know if Supervisor Price did, but I did go back and look at the PowerPoints. And one of the ones she brought up was Orange County, and did a large, I can't remember how many millions of dollars, but they did a relatively large fiber and to the home project. I have trouble seeing how, an Orange County model sort of fits into our model, but I don't know. I couldn't glean much from from going through the PowerPoint and reading the additional things, but I think some folks are interested in larger projects where, as you said, we're applying not with the ISP, but as Albemarle County, and how that would actually be built out, I don't know. But those are the two things I would add to Trevor's discussion of things I heard.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I am not at all in favor of Albemarle County being responsible for what I would call hardware or infrastructure responsibilities. I support Albemarle County being able to financially entice providers to do that. And I thought, my understanding is that's really what ABBA does, that we are not looking to be any sort of a provider. The long-term expense, data equipment is being upgraded and obsoleted so fast. I don't think we want anything to do with taking on that kind of responsibility. I really appreciate what Waldo said and others have echoed. These little islands of isolation out there, we cannot allow that to continue, or there will be no incentive for them to be covered. And I don't have the expertise that any of y'all have. I just want to see us do whatever we can to expand broadband to as many of our residents and businesses as possible. That's really the only thing I know. I don't have the technical expertise to say it much more than
that. I certainly agree with that. I don't think there's any interest in anybody's to go into the broadband, the ISP business as a county.
Trevor, as I think about the Office of Broadband Support, or whatever they might be called, in parallel to what the EDA has, that strikes me as just an incredible resource in so many areas, but absolutely vital when we try and address the equity issues, because that's way beyond the scope of what this group can effectively do and administer. And we might be able to help set policy, but really beyond that, there's a lot of toting and carrying that goes on when you look at that. And I know people in my community near where I live who some kind of internet passes by their house and they don't have it. And they don't have it because they can't afford it. So they don't have any bills to turn in because they never got hooked up, which means now their kids don't have online school. And I don't see a way out of that unless we make this more affordable, either by paying for it ourselves or offering incentives to the ISPs to lower the prices or something. And without that, I think we're going to continue to have equity issues, regardless of where we built out fiber in the county.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. And I think it may mean that we, as part of the equity aspect, we, the county, have to contribute towards that last mile of delivery, which may be why some families don't get it. And as much as we can to put pressure on the providers when they make an offer, that they include all of the households along those lines.
Right.
Not allow them to pick, the 100 most beneficial return on investment for them and leave out the 30 or 40, whatever it may be, that it's going to cost them some money. And so I think it probably has to be a combination of both. We put more pressure on them to expand, and we have to contribute more to get to that last mile for people. Maybe it's, if they pay the 400 feet, the county contributes whatever the cost is, for the differential to get to the 1,000 feet. I mean, I don't know the calculation, but we can't leave the individual households left out. I mentioned at our board meeting the other day, I had a couple call me a weekend or two ago. They found a house they really want, but they both work from home. They got kids going virtually to school. And if they don't have broadband there, they will not make an offer on that house.
Yep.
I'd like to point out that there's a bit of a conflict here that, no municipality, no county in the country has seen 100% broadband coverage. Like, it just hasn't happened yet. We're not gonna be able to do it either.
Right.
And the conflict here is between our method of accomplishing that is solely through attempting to entice the private sector to do things that are decreasingly enticing. And so the cost will become higher and higher to get them to do it. It's Zeno's paradox. Like, you can never actually cover the entire distance. You just get half, and then half of that, and then half of that, and half of that, and half of that. You can't ever complete it. But the challenge is, as we attempt to entice them to further this, the build out, we're going to get into increasing problems with equity, because where they're not covering is skews heavily toward areas that they regard as less desirable as customers for economic and other reasons. So what we have is them extending service to people who are more on the margins of people who can afford to maintain that service and take advantage of it. But we are not between the ISP and the customer. We're not the customer. Those people are the customers. And so we have no authority. We can't go to, say, CenturyLink and make demands of them with any authority whatsoever, because we don't give them the checks. We give them a check and then we go away. We can't hold out anything. We can't stop giving them something. Like, as a customer, I can tell CenturyLink I refuse to pay anymore, and they don't care. I'm too small to negotiate with them. But if I were represented by an entire broadband authority, along with 10,000 other customers, then you really get somewhere. And so my work for years has been in federal contracting with big technology providers. And I'll tell you, when you're not the customer as a government agency, the big technology providers don't care what you have to say. It's just like the grown-up characters in Peanuts. Just wah, 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 is what they hear. So this is going to become increasingly problem. Just to put a fine point on this, as we get access to more people who don't have access now and are less traditionally attractive to CenturyLink as customers, if we are not in the middle of that relationship, then we're going to set people up for difficult relationships with CenturyLink, et cetera, whomever else builds out there, which will come back to us, which we will have no authority to do anything about. And Mike, you will spend increasingly percentages of your time talking to angry people to whom you say, I'm sorry, I can't do anything.
It doesn't sound good for Mike.
It's not good for anyone.
Any other comments? Trevor?
I'm just curious, great concern raised, Bucky, and we certainly, our approach, we wouldn't want it to kind of continue and worsen an equity issue. But what do you see as ways out of that? I mean, other than getting in between the ISP and the customer, what would that look like?
I'm sorry, is that a question for me?
I'm sorry, I meant Waldo. I said Bucky.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Bucky was big on my screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, I won't belabor this because I've gone over it before, but I am absolutely convinced that our only path forward with these unserved and underserved areas that doesn't end up with a monopoly for huge chunks of the county and all of the bad things that come with a monopoly is Albemarle County becoming a middle mile provider that then builds out fiber and leases it out once it's in the ground to ISPs. They can maintain their own hardware. We don't care. We just put glass tubes underground and lease it out for 20 years at a time. That's the only solution forward or only path forward that I see that doesn't lead to giving out funding over and over again to cover and recover areas as new technology becomes available to never covering everybody. That's that we be that vendor as is done in municipalities across the country. This is like a super normal thing at this point. And I would like to see us do that because I don't see a path forward otherwise to anything close to covering north of 90% of the county.
I would be surprised if we're going to be able at this time with this amount of preparation to actually solve, have the solution template for this problem. But awareness is the beginning. Making sure that we're aware of the problem that, for example, when we're putting forth a budget proposal and, the last 14 houses over here didn't make it in, maybe we go back to that vendor and we squeeze them at that time saying, hey, let's get those 14 houses in. So that we don't create these little pockets that are left over any more than we have to. To
only
avoid
if we're prepared to say, then we're not going to fund you. Like that's the catch.
Well, obviously any negotiation that has to be a possible step. But if you're managing your relationship well, you don't get there very quickly. So I would encourage us to be there. But I'm not sure that further discussion, unless someone has been hit by a bolt of lightning on this topic, is going to solve it at this moment. I'd be happy to see someone who was hit by the bolt, though. Oh, Richie.
Oh, I don't have a bolt, but I don't know if this moves the ball forward or anything. But I've always thought that the Broadband Authority should have the granting authority that the EDA has. And whether if we were to have that authority, whether that gives us more local control over what the ISPs do, again, I don't know, but I know we're getting VATI and they have their rules and we have to comply with their rules. But if we had our own authority to issue grants or to manage a grant program, we could change the rules.
And you're back to legislative initiatives here because that would require a change.
That may be. But I mean, even when we look at CVEC, that grant doesn't go through the Broadband Authority. Mike negotiated it and the Broadband Authority approved it, but it goes through the EDA.
Right, because we had no ability to administer those funds under the Virginia Wireless Services Authorities Act. Yeah. So, that would be a simple amendment. It's not really a gangbuster kind of thing. But it would surprise me that some of the wireless services, some of the broadband authorities around the state, particularly those who are more engaged in creating their own structures, it would seem like this would be handy for them too. I don't know. We can't be the only ones who would want that. Anything else on this topic?
Well, what Mike and I have talked about, and again, kind of looking under some affordability lens from carry forward money and CARES Act work that we're doing, and what might be available, as well as some other funds that the board created in their strategic. It's a strategic priority fund that basically has been in reserve. What may come forward is something on the order of about $500,000 for the balance of 21, and then somewhere on the order of maybe $2 million for 22. Again, those are just, I think what I've said is to our budget office and the county executive is based on the work that I've done with Mike and looking at the work that potentially is out there, we probably could spend as much money as we could be given, but with that said, knowing what other priorities are, really looking at one-time money, understanding the pandemic, and really not committing too much until we get into January and see what the future forecast is going to be looking like through our real estate numbers. Those are numbers that we've kind of penciled in as some potential. And so is there a reaction from the authority on those numbers, good numbers, or not even close to where we should be, what we should be talking about? Would be interested in feedback on that too.
Well, there's a lot of fiber to lay, a lot of folks to connect, a lot of services that need to be met. I don't think any of us have a number. If I only had $47 million, I could get it all done. We don't have that number. I would love to have that number, but I would have it, and the next day it would be invalid because something would have changed. So I think our strategy of whittling away at the mountain and hoping the mountain gets smaller is probably reasonable given the resources we have. But I don't think there could be any question that the amount of money you've mentioned is money we could put to good use, hopefully leveraged with state and or federal monies to get a lot more bang for the buck than just those dollars.
I would love to know how many households in Albemarle County are presently unserved, and at the current, let's just pretend it is exactly as cheap to serve all houses as it has been so far. We know it won't be, but at that rate, how much does it cost to serve the rest of Albemarle County? Like, I feel like we need like the thermometer that goes up as people donate money. like how's it going? Because inevitably the cost will go up. I mean, probably something close to exponentially, or at least geometrically as we get closer. But if it were linear, what is it? I don't know. Is that 2 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 100 million? I don't have any idea.
I also wonder whether or not some sort of funding program where you guarantee a certain level of service. So if they have so many pass-bys, they have 100 pass-bys, and they think they're only going to get 40 connections. What if we said, no, there'll be 100? Somehow we'll subsidize that, and there would be 100. Would that then get them to say, well, if you're willing to guarantee a minimum 10 megabyte service at this rate to 100% of the pass-bys, we'll build into those pockets, because then we know that there's going to be a revenue stream coming in. Because if that person says, I don't know if I can afford it or not, but the county's going to subsidize up to 10 megabytes. Okay, I'll do it. And then maybe they buy the gigabyte service, or, because it's now somewhat less. I don't know, just an idea.
And
I don't know how much it would cost.
But the fund is going to compete with our affordable housing fund that we keep saying we have to put together.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's right. Yes, I realize the problem. But
and then there's always the people across the street. We got to get them hooked up to the sewer system.
Right. It's always something. Yeah, it's always something. Mm-hmm.
No, but I like Kara thinking about, like, it's a crazy idea, and like I wish that we had a venue to spend more time ginning up crazy ideas. Like, I never thought in those terms, and like clearly that's a really important stat for ISPs. It's like, what's the take rate going to be? And to be able to say we guarantee an 8% take rate or whatever. Wow. Like, what? I mean, of course we can't be on the hook for that forever. Like, that's infinite downside,
Right. But if you 2 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So if you and then, does that change the dynamics? And does it change the number? Instead of giving you $640,000, we're going to give, in 1 year, we'll give you $640,000 over the next 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is, because we're guaranteeing a take rate. Does that change the dynamic of the number of people that get served? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of what we're doing with CVIC, is we're saying we're not going to tax you on any of the infrastructure. So that's always, an option.
Right. So I don't know what it does on the other side of the equation, on the service provider side of the equation.
Yeah. I'm going to have to take off. I'm hearing people come, kids and dogs barking. So I've got to sign off, but.
Before you leave, you have any thoughts on the Christmas Eve meeting? Did you want to move that to a different time, Trevor?
I was just, it's the next agenda item, noting that it's the 23rd. I know it's only a 90-minute meeting, folks. I get that, but staff, everybody has really been working hard through the pandemic. We've had a lot of staff that have been just standing on their head, and we were really in the executive office trying to block off, those last 2 weeks of December as best we could to not have meetings and additional like outside commitments. And I know just our meeting is on the 23rd. I'm going to be off that week, but I'll make the meeting because, I can. I just was wondering, would the board be interested in moving it up to the previous week, maybe on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, or we have a board meeting. The second board meeting is in the previous week. And so this may not work. I just thought I would raise that as a question, and I certainly would be interested in bumping it up a week earlier if we could.
I support that as well. I really think we need to let people have a little bit of a break. I mean, I noticed today at the grocery store, there was a uplifted spirit that I have not seen among customers in months. I think the vaccine positive news, the holidays, I would really support not having a meeting that week.
I'm good on the 15th or the 17th. Are any of those particularly good or bad?
Do we need one for December? Just a question.
We get paid the same whether we come or not.
Only if the authority wanted to see kind of what the likely formal recommendation that would be going into the budget process. If you guys would like to have a circle back around, it's basically this program, but with tightening up numbers based on working with our budget office and affordability as part of the process that would then be presented to the Board of Supervisors in January. So Mike, you may have other things on the agenda. That would be the one for me. If Abba is okay with us taking today's discussion and just moving forward with it, then I think that's fine too.
I'd love to see that, but I don't need to drag everybody else to a meeting for it if there's not general interest.
I agree.
Either of those nights work for me, Bucky, just by chance. Mike, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to bring up the process question board, and that is, as we put together our prior request, it turned into a memo that was signed off by the Broadband Authority. I think that's all that has to happen. I don't know that we need a vote. I think we can just, the Broadband Authority can authorize the treasurer and the chief administrative officer to put together a memo that would go in front of the Board of Supervisors and the budget office. So I'm with Liz on not having a meeting at all if none is needed. But we do need to work quickly on, if the Broadband Authority is looking toward funding mechanisms, whether it's for FY21 or into FY22, we need to make sure we've all signed off on that quickly, meaning it's got to be done before the end of the year. And then I can keep everyone abreast on what's going on with the Broadband Advisory Council. So I don't need a time to report out. I'll just send some Word documents, but so I just wanted to bring up the process question. Yeah, the process.
I was just asking the question. I wasn't trying to cancel it, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right, gotcha.
Well, in the interest of resolving this issue and letting Liz go, let me move to cancel the next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
And we'll talk through the details of what to do about this once you go away, Liz. But all those in favor, let's run the list. Trevor?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Waldo?
Yeah.
Liz?
Yes.
And I vote in favor as well. So that's done.
And
Thank you for staying.
I'm open for anything. So,
Merry Christmas, Liz and Trevor.
Yeah.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you.
So we were not quite finished before we diverted. I don't think we were quite finished on the strategic plan review and capital planning work session. it seems like there are a million good ideas. We should not have this meeting and, we should not have this at the 90th minute of our meeting. We should be having this conversation at the, 20th meeting of our minute, or 20th minute of our meeting. Any other?
I think we've had good discussion and input from Mike and I to be able to move forward with some recommendations. I also think there were some discussion items that I think would be really good to have maybe some future work sessions on. I'm still learning about broadband, and many of you on this board have forgotten more than I'll ever learn. But I would love to hear more about some of the ideas that Bill and Bucky have raised today, and certainly kind of from an equity lens and how what could we do programmatically. I think that can happen. Let's get some funding in the queue, so we have that out there to actually do something with, while we look at our strategic plan and look at the things that we might do that we can tweak it or expand it to help not create those islands of underserved areas in the community. So I think I've heard what we need to hear to move forward. How about you?
The one thing that I have a little bit of concern about with funding, and I think if I say it, it'll take care of the concern, is if the funding is tied down so tightly that we then come up with some great ideas, if it's put in one bucket, it makes it difficult to move it to another bucket. So we need to make sure if we come up with a brilliant idea and we go, oh, well, we put it over here for a grant, but we decided if it went over here for a grant, that'd be better. So we're going to come back and take it here and put it over there. Just some sort of awareness that this is money for broadband. We're putting it here, but it might get moved to where it's more effective later. I don't know how to do that. I know it can be done. It just ought to be expressed.
No, that's a good observation, Bill. Thanks. All righty then. Let's put a pin in this conversation. Is done for now, but something we'll certainly revisit in the future. We kind of sorted the Christmas Eve meeting question by not having one, which seems like a reasonable way to go, particularly given, well, it's 2020, right? So it'd be nice to be in another year. Is there any other business that we need to bring up at this time or conversation?
Nothing for me.
No? All right. Well, I thought it would, I listened to the video that Mike sent out the link on. I'm sure his head got maybe 8 times bigger as Jeff was talking about what a wonderful guy he is. And I hope that factors in your salary negotiations, Mike. That's all I can say. No, but it was certainly recognition well earned. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Very good. All those in favor signify with the upraised thumb.
Yes.
Looks like unanimous consent on that.
Secret ballot.
Secret ballot. Good job. Thank you all very much. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and please be safe wherever you are and whatever you do.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you all.
Next
For
year,
the
if not
comments
before.
too. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All
You're
right.
welcome. Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Afternoon,
Bye.
good evening, and good night.
Yeah.